If someone were to ask me what the most important things in Raid Shadow Legends are, I'm sure somewhere in that list would be two things. First of which being, of course, legendary skill tomes or potentially, mythical skill tomes, depending on who you're building out. But then the other option would be support champions, and I'm here to show you a great way to build a support champion or possibly some support champions apart from this champion while also saving on legendary tomes. So the champion that's going to be in question today is Lady of Ireth. So I actually got her. She has absolutely abysmal reviews just everywhere in the game. I think she is okay. And here is why. So her A1, she attacks one enemy, and she's going to instantly activate a continuous heal buff on all allies with less than 85% HP. So I do quite like this because obviously the continuous heal is going to heal either 7.5 or 15% of your max HP, depending on which version you have. She places her own 15% continuous. If this was just instantly activates one random continuous heal, that would be kind of but the fact that she activates it when they're damaged below the threshold where they'd actually gain use from it, that is fantastic. A2 removes all debuffs from a target ally, then heals that ally by 40% of their max HP. This heal can be critical. If the target ally is not fully healed, places a block damage buff on them for 2 turns. If the target ally is fully healed, fills their turn meter by 50%, which is pretty decent. On a 3-turn cooldown, maybe not. Somebody like an Apothecary has a skill that's very similar to this, albeit at a rare level. And then she's placing a Strengthen and a Continuous Heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. And then, of course, she does have a passive here where she's going to place a shield buff equal to 15% of her max HP on the ally with the lowest HP for 2 turns at the start of her turn, which still goes on a 1-turn cooldown there. And she has a aura where she increases ally HP in all battles by 30%, which is an absolutely insane aura. Like, that's a lot of HP to be gaining. I think why people are so harsh on her is because of her long cooldowns. So, for example, if this was a 3 booking to a 2-turn cooldown, I think people would be a lot less harsh on her because fully cleansing as well as healing, and then with a critical heal, and then also block damage for 2 turns, or filling their turn meter, that is a pretty good skill. I think 3 turns is a little bit too long to flip back to it, though. And then obviously this, if it was a 4-turn cooldown books to a 3, I think people would be a little bit higher on her. Or, of course, if it was on a 2 or a 3-turn cooldown, right? So I think it's just kind of a combination of her kit, where she seems to be almost at like a very low-tier legendary or a high-tier epic in terms of what she can do, because a skill like this is very similar to something like a Rector Droth. You could easily argue that Rector Droth is actually a little bit stronger just based on the fact that she's an epic. You use epic books instead of legendary books, but as you can see, I have not put a single book into this champion. So why is this possible? What is the strategy? I am combining the refresh accessories, which each accessory gives a 5% chance to prevent a skill cooldown. So you can get a total of 15%. I'm only sitting at 10 right now because I don't have a banner that's a refresh for the Sylvan Watchers. And I'm combining that with a Reflex set. Reflex set, of course, is going to have a 40% chance to reduce a random skill cooldown. This is going to go every time she takes a turn. So at the start of each turn, you're going to have a 40% chance to essentially lower the cooldown of one of these skills by 1 turn, which, considering that she's on not terribly long cooldowns, that's actually going to proc more than you might think. And then the reason this is possible is, so if you think about it, when you're building champions in Raid, if it's a damage-dealing champion, you want them to be built out in a damage-dealing set. So like Savage, Cruel, Lethal, what do we have now? Merciless, I believe, as well, right? Or the Ravager set, or whatever it might be. So you don't really have the option to build them inside like a Reflex set or Refresh. Whereas with a support champion, so someone even like a Pythion, I'd have to look by rank here. So somebody like a Pythion, you're probably going to want him built out in a little bit more speed since he's reviving. You might also want him built out in Immortal, so he's healing himself. If you're in the arena, you might want him built out in Reflex. So you don't really have options to build these champions, so you do need to book them, right? And that's what I'm getting at here. So these champions like this do have to be booked. Champions like your damage dealers obviously have to be booked to get their cooldowns down, because if you could run them in a Reflex, that's great, but you're also going to be ignoring far less defense, for example. Like, so if I ran my Harima in Reflex, I'm losing 10% crit rate, and I'm not ignoring 25% of the defense, essentially. So champions like Lady Ireth, though, she can very easily be ran in a Reflex set or a refresh accessories. And the reason for that is all she really needs is survivability and speed, and maybe a little bit of resistance. You don't need to worry about her healing herself because she's placing heals on everybody, and she's probably going to be paired up with a team that can also heal. She's not reviving, so it's not crucial that you have those skills available, because obviously between RNG based revives and just having a lower cooldown, I'm going to choose having a lower cooldown, right? So essentially, she just brings a good support kit, and you can have a little bit of RNG implemented into it, and it's not going to make a big deal at the end of the day. I'm going to go ahead and start the video now of actually running her through essentially the last floor in Doom Tower Hard here. So floor 119, I ran through with this team right here. You can still see it even with my camera there, which is perfect. So we had a Kemptum who's basically just placing hexes, and also then him and Tomb Lord are then poisoning, so is Mithrala on her A1. Mithrala's coming in for a bit of a cleanse, but really the only healing comes from these two, and she actually put out over 500,000 worth of heals on this particular team. Especially when it gets to the end of the run, you can see that a Kemptum was just absolutely loaded up with debuffs like stuns and I think decreased speed, decreased defense, all that sort of stuff. She comes in, gets one single turn, cleanses that all, places a block damage on him. She is actually a surprisingly good champion, and that is said with a huge caveat, which is she's surprisingly good if you don't book her. So I would say it's probably worth investing in her to get her to a 6-star if you have the refresh accessories, and if you have the ability to build her in a very good reflex set. If you're not able to do either of those things, I would say you're probably better off not building this champion, or not using this champion, or not depending on her at the very least. But I just want to throw this out there. I'll probably do a video at some point breaking this down for some other champions that you can use this same strategy for in the game, because at the end of the day, I'm a low spend player. I know there's a lot of free-to-play players out there. Excuse me. And I know people are looking for ways to build champions and get use from them without necessarily spending resources. So doing it in this faction where you can save your legendary books for, you know, nukers or maybe more high-value supports or those sorts of things is insanely useful. Because the other thing too is, so this gear can easily be muled around to somebody else if you have another support in a similar situation like this, right? And for me, for example, I've been saving legendary books for about 3 months, probably, at this point. Maybe, well, no, not 3 months. That's actually a blatant lie. I used all my legendary books in the champion training at the start. So this, for me, is probably about a month worth of legendary books. And I'm farming basically 4 levels of clan boss per day, taking all of them down, getting double rewards and all that sort of good stuff, right? And I will say, at least 3 of these came from tournament winnings as well. So, you know, the average player isn't getting many legendary books. And then those, if they're not being used by a support champion, they're going into more high-value champions. So, for example, I still have to book out Rathalis. I still have to book out Rigosh, apparently. Like, all these champions here, you can see they're not fully booked, right? So I still have to put a lot of resources into them. I still have to do a lot of upgrading with them, and I think that being able to just alleviate that completely from my account and then save, you know, these 11 of the 12 books for the Fusion, right? The Fusion himself, Armand's, is going to be taking 11 of those legendary books. If I had to spend, you know, even let's say 5 legendary books on Irith to get her skills down, that's going to be a huge hit, and my Armand's is going to be significantly weaker if he has 5 less books into him, right? So I hope this was food for thought, at least, and I hope this gives you guys some ideas of how to build champions, or, you know, who you could build out with this strategy. Let me know down below if there's any champions you think would do really good with a refresh set and a reflex set instead of booking them. It could be epics, it could be legendaries, it could even be rares. Anybody that you think would do very, very well with this synergy in mind. The other thing I will mention here real quick too, so I did add a little bit more RNG into it. I actually came over here and got the Mastery, the Cycle of Magic, which also has an additional 5% chance of decreasing the cooldown of a random skill by 1 at every turn. So there's a lot of RNG going on with this champion. She gets a lot of cooldowns. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.